Saying a little longer, we're mining in bold display of community action youth from Sefwi Akontombra in the Western North region confronted gun-wielding illegal miners operating in a local forest reserve and overpowered them. Footage from the amateur video, which has since gone viral on social media space, shows the youth destroying mining equipment as they sought to reclaim natural resources. Despite the visible threats from the miners, the community members remained resolute in their mission to protect the forest reserve from illegal activities that jeopardized the environment and local livelihoods. Let's watch the video. Maybe we will have to put hands on deck. Security analyst Colonel Festus Abuaje has joined us via phone for a follow-up on this. Colonel, thank you so much for your time. You're welcome to Newsbeat. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Is this scene encouraging to see the youth of a community fight for their lives the way we have seen in this video?
You broke a bit.
Well, I'm sorry about that. I'm asking if this video we've seen trending from Sefwi Akontombra with the youth fighting for their community, is this something that is encouraging and that must be promoted for the youth to also step in the fight against galamsey?
See, ordinarily, this should have been the task of the government that we have put in place, vested with all the powers and the resources to protect the environment, which is part of our heritage and which is part of or central to our national security because it impinges on human security. But when government fails either to take the initiative or collaborate with the other stakeholders, then you are left with this kind of, medieval type of scenario, which currently is only synonymous with conflict countries like the DRC or years ago in Liberia and Sierra Leone. This is not what we should be seeing in Ghana in 2024 when we claim and laud ourselves that we're a full and effective democracy. It speaks volumes about the failure of government.
So, are you saying that this shouldn't be encouraged with what we've seen with the youth? Is it threatening or is it a threat to government? Because if the youth probably increase in these numbers, if what they are doing is copied by other youth in other communities and it escalates, it might be some action against government, not so?
No. You see, let's understand as Ghanaians that this notion of national security is not about regime security. The government was put in place to do precisely what the local communities are doing, which it has failed to do. So if the locals who are the primary stakeholders, who are affected in diverse ways, the rivers they drink are polluted, the food that they grow and eat, for instance, are also poisoned, their family, mothers, wives are, bringing forth children who are deformed. The other livelihoods like cocoa and other farms are being destroyed. Now, what other option do these communities have? It's not about taking the law into your hands. It's about stepping in to protect what is naturally yours, which your government has failed to do. It's never a threat to the government. It's rather an indictment on the government which has failed. Those that we are seeing wearing suits and ties, pretending that they have not been aware of this situation. And I argue from the beginning that our government has tremendous, considerable resources in terms of institutions, in terms of powers, authority, constitutional and otherwise, in terms of money, in terms of the human resources, the military, the police, and so on and so forth. So what they are doing is a natural consequence of the failure of state presence in the areas where they are living. And it's very dangerous, not to government, but for national stability. We've seen weapons in there. And there are research papers I keep mentioning by the African Center for Strategic Studies and by the Institute for Security Studies, where I used to work, adducing empirical evidence that some of these nationals, as well as foreigners, including Chinese and others from within our region and elsewhere in Africa, are armed. And we know that we are in a conflict area, a conflict region. So this is an attraction. That's what we call the affinity, the nexus between natural resources and coercive tools and instability. And some of us find it very, very difficult, disturbing, that Ghana, which is not Liberia, Ghana, which is not Sierra Leone in the 1990s, Ghana, which is not DRC currently, must be going through this kind of situation. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether indeed we have a government. We don't have. Because we have a government, this should not have happened. And no government, I've argued, can tell us that they are not aware. Because we know, they tell us that they have national security operatives. Instead of terrorizing political opponents, this is the work that national security operatives should be doing. But even before them, we have the state architecture, the state security infrastructure that descends from the national to the regional, to the district, to the local. Then we have our chiefs, who are part of the governance architecture. And government wants to tell us that they have not been aware that over the past 80 years, because this thing started in 1989, when the PNDC Law 218 was passed with good intentions to try and get the rural communities to mine as our forefathers and foremothers were doing, using incantain and headpans and shovels and so on, but not using chamfan, what I call the third industrial revolution, technologies that we are seeing in the video that you are playing. The caterpillars, oil moving equipment, the dredgers, the this, the that, the that. That was not what PNDC law that I mentioned, intended. But at least since 2006, when other laws were passed and other regulations, our governments have been aware. So how come all of a sudden, even in 2022, when the government was not able to control galamsey, it then amended the existing laws to extend mining in whatever form into our forest reserves? Look, I don't want to go by definitions, and I think Ghanaians must put definitions and technicalities aside. Now, whether you are legal or illegal, if your activity is polluting our rivers and our water bodies and destroying our forest, then you have offended the law. So it's not a matter of saying that some mines are legally, authorized to mine. If their activities are resulting in the devastation that we are seeing, that is what we should be addressing.
Right.
So this ad hoc committee that the government has established to engage with the stakeholders, to do what? For them to roll back and say that, okay, let the devastation continue. But the government doesn't need an ad hoc committee. All it needs is to roll up its sleeves and then get to work and stop those, illegal activities on our water. That is all. The ad hoc committee is not at all the solution.
Right.
And certainly not the engagement with the stakeholders. Because the stakeholders are exercising a constitutional right to tell the government that you have failed.
Right.
And we are warning you that if you don't get to work in 2 weeks or 3 days or whatever, we're going to do ABCD. That is not negotiable at all.
Right. Colonel Festus Abwaji, we're grateful for interacting with us on this area. It has to do with galamsey, and everybody has a responsibility. We're sitting on definitely a ticking time bomb.